Okay, so welcome to week 9 of 7134 EDN, Making Sense of Learning and New Technologies. And this evening, we're going to be continuing our examination of the leadership aspect of the course. Just a couple of notes for next week. We have mid-semester break, so there won't be a session on next week. If you turn up, you'll be here all alone in the virtual world. And then we'll have our last, I think it's 4 weeks after the break, going through the last 4 elements of the course. Looks like everyone has submitted their assignment, which is great for their first assignment, and they'll be marked over the next couple of weeks. So normally there's a 3-week turnaround on assignments, but sometimes that can happen a bit quicker, depending upon other workload commitments. So let me just bring up our session for this evening. And this evening we're looking at ICT leadership in educational organisations. And I've provided you with 2 readings from New Zealand, well, Australia and New Zealand. They work together through, I can never say it correctly, but Mchicha, or MCEETY, and they produced some quite good documents exploring the ways that schools and leaders in schools can go about engaging with technology in their environments. Related to classroom practice, although as with most things that we've explored, it can be applied to classroom practice as well. And welcome, Toby.
Hello.
We've just started and we're just about to get into the readings for this week. So I'll ask the awkward question first.
What is it then?
Who has done the readings for this week?
Oh, it's pretty. We've been pretty busy. To be honest, I have not gone through the reading.
I do understand. It just does make it a bit more effective if you've done the readings. Of course, you can then have a bit more of the topics. But try your best with what we go through this evening. And Hutan, have you had a chance to look at the readings?
No, not about those readings, because I'm just working on my assignments, so I couldn't, sorry.
Okay then. Well, let me share the readings and then we'll go through them. But things from previous readings, we might cover that first, since hopefully you may have had a chance to look at some of those. Has anyone got any questions about things that we've discussed so far in the course before we get into this week's material? Okay, so I'll take that as a no, at least at this stage. And let's get into the readings. Okay. Whoops, I've gone to the wrong one. The screen's good. So this is the first reading, looking at leadership strategy for schools and for teachers engaged with learning in an online world. And it goes through steps. First up, setting the context for this sort of engagement, particularly looking at leadership policy, leadership capability, and leadership responsibilities. Now, all teachers and can take on some leadership roles, and everyone does, but there are certain priorities that leaders have to engage with, and Mchicha identified those, developing the required competencies that teachers and students needed to have, equipping principals, teachers and support staff with the knowledge, skills, tools and experiences to transform the use of ICT in their in their workplaces, and to connect leaders together, to share ideas and to work and systems, and to develop partnerships between home and schools and the community. They were of technology from a leader's perspective in schools. Now, a classroom leader would have, but probably some of those would still resonate. Instead of connecting with other leaders, you'd be connecting with other teachers, and you'd probably have a more focus on actual student engagement with activities. But this is looking primarily from a leader and school perspective, not necessarily from the student's perspective just yet. But to achieve that, excuse me, leaders do have to have certain capacity. Now, the first one is actually having an understanding of technology themselves, and that's quite rare. Of course, most of our leaders haven't necessarily seen a need to engage with educational technologies in particular. Of course, there'd be processes and other leadership processes in the main. But being responsive to what the community expects and what the political aspects expect of school and of leaders, developing dispositions and capacity around learning, pedagogy, and administration. Administration is probably not one teachers see a lot of, but there are a whole lot of processes around using ICT effectively for, but primarily, particularly from a teacher perspective, you'd be looking at using ICT effectively to support students' learning, and using it to adopt new pedagogies. As we've mentioned a few times in this course, the main drive of the use of technology in schools has been to change pedagogical practice, not just to use the technology for the sake of using the technology, but actually to enable pedagogies that have been around for a long, long time, but have been very difficult achieve in a classroom, particularly ones around differentiated learning and project-based learning, which can be quite challenging without a good support structure around ICTs and the internet and all the other aspects that go with that. And a couple of others there around building workforce capacity, which would be the teachers and the administrative staff in the school, evaluating the educational soundness of ICT software and systems, actually making the right choices around the use of technology. Teachers do that as well in their classrooms, but it's even more important at a school level or a system level or a country level, because if you choose the wrong technologies, then things can go quite badly wrong. We've had a number of major states over the last few years where they've rolled out major technological changes and they've failed, and they've wasted many, many millions of dollars having to then reassess their approaches around ebooks, but also around tablets and a few other big initiatives that weren't well thought out enough and have produced rather embarrassing failures. And then finally, buildings and infrastructure and technical support. Everyone loves to complain about technical support, but it's an important aspect of schools and of any organisation, having that technical support to support educators in what they're willing to spend their time making sure the equipment works and the internet works and all those other aspects. So let's pause there and have a bit of discussion around your experiences with leadership and around those capabilities or expectations on leaders. So who's had any chance to be a leader in terms of the use of tools, where you've had a chance to make decisions around pedagogy or equipment or approaches being used in a school? Excuse me. Hutan, have you had any experiences with leadership roles around the use of technology?
No, I've been I've never been a leader, school leader, so I have not experience of leading. And as I mentioned before, in Iranian school, the technology are not using. We commonly don't use technology for learning, and that's my idea to for my assignments, and also it's my real idea to in real world I use technology in Iranian schools. Yeah, but not yet.
Okay, so a leader in that environment in order to change or affect change in Iranian schools.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And Toby, have you had any chance to be in with a small group or aspects of that nature?
At the school level, well, I've been the subject head, and then particularly for language and literature, and it was all just to coordinate the subject center and keeping stock and records, observing stuff, and so on. But yes, in the syllabus, there were some requirements for students to view, like William Shakespeare play and so on. So I did allow teachers to have access, having audio and then video of such, but not actually to do with computer technology. It's just audio, video play, and so on, not really going deeper into computer-wise.
Okay, but there'd be similar parallels with access to audiovisual materials and technologies with other digital technology in terms of how you would plan out and set priorities and engage staff with the use of those technologies. And Patricia, how about yourself?
No, I haven't. I've always used it within my classroom, but not at a leadership level, because the two things against me is, one, I'm in SEP, and therefore why would I be interested, and how, you know, like there's never seen a need. And secondly, I think by age, I think for some reason technology is very much associated with the young. Why, I have no idea. And so the fact that I'm actually quite computer literate seems lost on no, well, it's not that they're lost, I just don't own up to it, because I think like it's just, anyway, no, I've never had it. So what I've seen and experienced is that someone begins an initiative and it's great, and then, which is exactly what happened a couple of years ago, he gets a promotion out of it, and the whole thing falls to hell at school because nobody else has been trained or is willing to step into that role. Do you know what I mean? There's no team around it. It's just one person. And I've seen that over and over again, and it's very disappointing.
It is, and it's one of the things that we'll be highlighting this evening around planning for education, because it is one of the major problems we have in educational technology. Too often it is driven by one or two people that have a particular passion, most often just a single person, and they've got a particular area of expertise, and transferring that across an entire organization is very difficult. That can be brought into play as you come to consider your implementation plan for your organization, that you can consider that can help overcome those problems. But it certainly is one of the major problems. Okay, now just to ask you, are you hearing me a little bit choppy? I'm sort of getting a little bit of choppiness from you guys when you're speaking.
Yeah, the same on your side.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. Google has changed over their system for use of Hangouts as of this week. So I'm just trying to see whether or not things are working as effectively as they have in the past. And that does seem to be something problematic. Everyone seems to be doing the same thing, so it's not one individual that's causing the problem. It seems to be a general issue at the moment. Hopefully that'll be resolved soon if it is a more widespread issue. But otherwise we'll just keep going with that at the moment. Okay, so the third aspect in an organization, and they are responsible for supporting the implementation of the use of technology. And Machicha has identified particular schools that do well in supporting experiential constructivist learning, but also those that engage with a range of things. Leaders are sort of taking responsibility of the actual learning processes, which is something that's fairly rare. Not an awful lot of school leaders get involved with setting pedagogical directions within a school. Sometimes that's a good thing. But where schools do really well is where they've got an agreed pedagogical approach, and all teachers support that approach or series of approaches and develop an organized way of teaching for the students. So instead of experiencing a whole range of approaches, and engage with one particular school-wide approach. Toby, I might just get you to mute your mic while I'm speaking. Just I'm getting a little bit of feedback there from.
Oh, sorry. Let me.
I'm just sort of hearing my voice back through your speaker.
As you know, I've been struggling to get through this, and I'm still not really well versed with the buttons here. So, okay, I see where it is.
That's fine. Okay, to hover your mouse over the screen, you should see a little bar along the top, and the second icon in will be a microphone with a line through it. And I see you found it. Other issue, well, they're not particularly. Okay, so one is around how the system uses ICT. Because one thing we found is that schools that have ICT with their students tend to model that use with their own practices. So where staff are using technology, and also the school itself, in terms of the system, is using technology effectively to communicate, to store materials, to distribute learning materials, and a whole range of other processes. So it's not just expecting students to engage with ICT, but the school itself demonstrating effective use of ICT. And that site to SMS messages to parents when students are late, to a whole range of other approaches. But we can't just expect students to model really effective use of ICT without also demonstrating that. Because so much demonstration and modeling, and ICT is part of that process. But we are also responsible for student learning outcomes, or student outcomes across the board. And some of those are listed there. And a few more on the next page, because students, of course, are the main focus of any educational organisation. But a few other things, ensuring that the use of the technology is so making sure that staff are aware of the latest technologies, the latest practices and educational theories, knowledge of the new technologies and how to use them through in-servicing and other programs that can support teachers, that teachers need to develop themselves professionally, allowing teachers to connect to each other and to share ideas and to develop expertise that they can then share with other teachers in the school and beyond the school, and engaging teachers with changes in the and different changes to assessment and reporting and decision-making processes. All of that enables teachers and keeps them involved in the processes so that it's not all seen as being done to them, but that teachers are inherently in the decision-making processes around a lot of these approaches. And also then leveraging students' expertise and willingness to embrace ICT, where a lot of schools have set up student help desks and other processes whereby students in engaging the teaching staff in the use of technology. And then there's a range of approaches there around building this capability to consider in your second assignment. Fostering shared beliefs and a sense of community, seeking feedback and appraisal of the organization and what its strengths are and what its weaknesses are, recognizing and acknowledging problems that exist. The connection between home and school is a major issue. It's one I've got a number of PhD students doing work on at the moment, trying to better understand and effectively communicate and home, now that we have all of these new technologies that can allow us to do that more effectively. And building networks between students, between parents, and between other educators. So a whole range of different things that you can consider your implementation plans to improve your particular organization. And then there's a few administrative aspects to consider, but some of the issues that we did raise a few minutes ago. Some of these approaches will challenge the status quo, and having a set vision that everyone can get behind can overcome those things. But if it's only just one or two people advocating for change, that can be very, very difficult. There needs to be certain standard operating procedures so that everyone knows how to effectively achieve various goals and outcomes. Students and teachers and schools, and that will then support those previous aims. Of course, getting the resources and sharing them equitably and making sure that they're usable and used is very important. Monitoring and evaluating and reporting on the effectiveness of these policies and practices. Actually, having a great plan is one thing, but actually making sure it's put into practice is a whole other leadership role. Planning for continuous improvement. So not just coming up with a plan and then saying that that's all then done, but the plan itself should encompass a renewal process and re-evaluation of the. Normally every 5 years is sort of what's generally done. Too often it just gets too burdensome, but there are a lot of cases where schools have put in place great plans and implemented them fantastically, allowed them to stagnate and then become outdated and eventually rather mediocre in terms of their engagement with technology. So let's pause again there and hear your thoughts. So I covered a whole range of concepts there. Hopefully some of them have prompted your thoughts. How might they apply to yourself in your organization as a classroom teacher or as an aspiring leader, in terms of how you could better enable the use of technology to be implemented in your organizations?
Can I say something?
You may.
It was very interesting reading for me. I think it could have it had lots of that's what I'm exactly think about, and it directly tell me about what I want to do and what I have planned to do. So it gives me lots of inspiration, and it would be very, very useful for me to read it carefully.
That's great to hear, Hootan. Remembering though, we're only just starting to touch on these issues. We are going to go into more depth around many of them. these are sort of the key points at the moment, but it's good to get a comprehensive overview of the range of different issues around leadership and the engagement of technology in schools, rather than just having a focus on the technology itself or the issues in a particular classroom and so forth. There's a whole range of different aspects that impact upon all of these issues, and that's why we started off many weeks ago now around systems thinking. All of these now represent the various systems that impact upon an organization. And we really have only just started looking at the internal systems at the moment. There's also a whole lot of external systems, other systems around parent groups and student groups and government groups, and yeah, lots and lots of systems that impact upon teachers. Even just the process of setting in place a curriculum. I know in teacher education, for example, we have to get our programs accredited. And we have over 150 different bodies that are involved in the whole process. But just as curriculum in schools is just as complex, and the implementation of that curriculum in a classroom is also very complex with lots of interfacing aspects. And one of the main roles of leadership is really to insulate teachers from a lot of these processes, so that teachers can focus on their key role of teaching without having to worry about all of these interactions. But if you're wanting to affect change, you have to be aware of them. Know how to leverage them and engage with them. And that will be also part of what you come up with in terms of your implementation plan, how to actually garner support for the implementation that you want to achieve. Of course, you really can't ever achieve anything systemically on your own. You have to develop a whole range of supporting networks that will assist in getting that change achieved. And you can certainly lead that and be part of that, but it would be very rare for that to be something that you would do by yourself. Okay, so other comments from what we just talked through?
Yeah, yeah, Jason, I get a lot of teachers, the reason they don't engage much with ICT is because they say there are no clear links to the Australian curriculum, and therefore they're not going to waste their time on it because it could all change next week anyway. And I find that with older teachers like myself, that's very true. We've seen a lot of changes. But as I keep saying, I'm pretty sure the new technologies are here to stay. So we better figure it out. And I find that's an ongoing frustration, that teachers are just not willing, and I'm not bagging them because they're exhausted and they're overworked and under-resourced. And schools are not putting their money where their mouth is. They're saying a lot, but they're not doing much.
No, I agree entirely. And change fatigue is very evident in teaching. Of course, there's just so curriculum change after curriculum change and new initiative after new initiative, and it is overwhelming. One wants to have their input into the teaching process, and unfortunately we no longer have the level of respect for individual teachers as we once did, to make really professional judgments around what occurs in the classroom. And lots of other people want to have a say and see those plans implemented. Hopefully that will change back at some stage. Near as bad as in America, it's just become endemic there. But we are sort of going down that same pathway with believing that their opinions and their views should override the individual teachers' views in their classroom. In their school, it goes a whole range of levels. But it is one of the major issues, and teachers do develop defense mechanisms around that, becoming resistant to change until they're convinced that it is actually something that is going to be around for enough years and something that is going to make an impact upon their students' learning. I've certainly been through many, many changes myself when I was a teacher, and the frustration when you put a huge amount of effort into something and then it's all scrapped for a new is extreme. But technology is something that has embraced every other area of society. So it's pretty hard now to argue that it won't impact teaching and education. Yeah, it's very hard to sort of sustain that argument. But of course, teachers will still have that immediate reaction. If they're being asked to do something, the immediate reaction is to be defensive and say, okay, how is this going to really learning? And is it going to have an impact this year or this semester or this term? So I fully understand that process. And that is something that you'll have to consider in your change management processes that you plan for in your, how to actually convince teachers that what you're proposing in terms of the changes to the organization is going to be a benefit to them. And it's not just teachers too. You have to actually convince all the different stakeholders involved in an organization. It's the students or the parents or the administration or the leadership. Teachers are just one of those groups that have to be convinced of the impact of your proposed changes, and will strategies that can be used to achieve that. Okay, Toby, did you want to say anything?
Well, I would admit that I do not regret taking this course, because it is more like an eye-opener to me and perhaps one or two others in the course, while other people have already been exposed to the style of pedagogy that is led in the classroom setting with integration of ICT. I feel that my approach to the pedagogical process is upon completion of this course and perhaps the other course that I have yet to meet for the program, it will all be a new approach. But as you have said, I am trying to reiterate what you have just said, that all other parties will have to be involved, ranging from the political input from the government with the curriculum content to be changed, because now we are teaching particularly focusing on the examination styles and methods, and then also teaching for life, but more is diverted to teaching to test, as they say. So I do not know how we would really design the technology, or technology would come in to help in that area. But as you say, all bodies or stakeholders, like I have expressed in my assignment with the system model already, and then all those stakeholders will come in to help out, and then we can design to make a new change, but all change to take a new approach with the use of technology in classroom setting. That's what I see. Like I think Wooten has also expressed the same sentiment and a viewpoint. That's about it. Thank you.
No problems. And yes, the whole issue around assessment and a focus on assessment is very much tied in expectations of accountability. And accountability not just of students, but also of teachers and of schools and of systems, where society as a whole is putting more money than ever into education, demanding outcomes from that without really having a deep understanding of the complexities of the educational processes at all levels. And that is having a big impact all the way through our education system. My main thought around is that it's mostly around teacher professionalism that is the big concern, in that we've eroded our respect for teachers to the level that now everyone feels that they should put in place to verify and that learning is occurring, without relying upon the teacher expertise to make those judgments. We're seeing that at the moment with the Queensland curriculum, senior curriculum, with the introduction, where in the past we've had teacher judgments being accepted in Queensland for judging students' overall achievement in their senior schooling are being eroded, and we'll probably see more diagnostic testing happening, but technology may be a way of assisting in that respect. NAPLAN Online, while it will have huge difficulties in getting established, does offer the opportunity to actually reduce testing and also reduce our focus on testing. It may not go that way, and probably won't, but potential to return testing back to the diagnostic process that it was intended to be, to provide information to teachers to better improve their classroom teaching. So we'll see how technology goes. Is the opportunity enough for technology to be beneficial in that respect? But there are examples where it's gone dramatically the other way, particularly in the United States, where they've got video surveillance of teachers in the classroom and a whole to monitor teacher performance that really do go against the nature of professionalism. But they're issues that you might bring up in your implementation plan, but they may not be applicable just at the moment for Australian schools. But there are plenty of schools that are looking at the idea of the use of cameras. There's a number here in Queensland where they've used cameras in the classrooms, but they've done it in a more respectful way, where they've used it to provide collaborative feedback, where all the teachers get together and view each other's recordings of their classroom practices, and in a collegial way, seek to identify which is happening. Okay, so let's move on to the other aspects of the document. Okay, we need to make a little bit more speed because we've got to get through it. Okay, so the document goes through a range of principles that you can consider around your implementation plans. So again, as always in teaching, pedagogy is the first one. And we need to ensure that effective teaching is occurring and effective learning, more importantly, is occurring with students. But technology can be used to support that and to assess that and to personalize, which is sort of one of the key benefits of educational technologies, allowing us to differentiate and personalize learning so that we can achieve better pedagogical practices. It needs to have educational soundness, so there needs to be an alignment with the curriculum and the educational systems, and also the safety aspects, but also cultural aspects. So a whole range of things that need to be considered in terms of the use of ICT around students' learning. But of course, teachers need learning as well. And there's a lot of advantages for the use of technology to support learning, as we're doing so at the moment ourselves, but particularly for schools and teachers that are isolated and they don't have strong local networks, or the school is not large enough to have a network, particularly for senior subjects where they may be the only teacher of that subject within 100 kilometres, and being able to actually develop their collegiality around their professional knowledge and ways of engaging with that curriculum can be a big challenge for a lot of teachers. Other issues around evidence-based, actually being able to demonstrate that there is research and evidence to support the implementation of different technologies. And that's certainly something that is lacking dramatically. In the media recently, there's been a bit of a backlash against the use of technology in schools, mostly by parents, where schools have implemented large BYOD programs, for example, without fully explaining it to parents, and parents have, particularly around the cost involved, but also around the actual improvement to student learning, have challenged those assumptions made by the school. And because there's not an awful lot of evidence to support those assumptions, the schools and the leadership in the schools had some difficulty in justifying the decisions that they made. So again, with your implementation plan, if you're deciding to actually implement something, it's great to have some research backing what you're attempting to achieve, so that if there is resistance, they can't then challenge it on lack of evidence that it will work effectively. But that can't always be done in educational technology, because new technologies emerge too quickly for research. If you wanted to say introduce a particular new technology that hadn't, such as tablets. Tablets came out without a lot of, there'd been research around the use of mobile Palm Pilots and devices like that, but no one had really thought to, or had the opportunity to do any real research around the use of tablet devices in schools. And suddenly thousands upon thousands of schools were spending huge amounts of money implementing tablet programs without a lot of research having been done to see whether or not that was a good idea or not. And as it turns out, there's actually a fair bit of negative research coming out at the moment saying that they may not be as effectively used as was originally hoped, and that laptops and other more traditional technologies may be more effective than tablet devices. There'll probably still need to be a lot more research to make that final decision, but at the moment, that's sort of where that is. Okay, then there's a whole range of issues around management and partnerships. Partnerships is an important one because there is a lot of opportunity for teachers and schools to actually engage with industry and with other schools and with parents and a whole lot of other organizations that can support the teaching process, particularly when we start using technology effectively. In the past, it's been difficult to get external partners into schools because they may not be local, or they've got their own businesses to run and so forth, so they can't spend time to go out and visit schools. But by being able to bring them in and communicate with them using technology, and to bring in guest speakers by video conferencing and all of those elements, and for teachers to communicate with them about their opportunities to support the educational processes, there's a lot more opportunity for partnerships than there has been previously. Okay, so the next section is around achieving these things and the processes of actually making them happen in a school or in an organization. The first bit is around objectives to do with transforming the learning environment, how we actually change where students learn, how they learn, and all of those elements, making sure that they've got access to technology and equipment, and it all loads up quickly enough so they don't have to spend 10 minutes logging in before they can actually start learning, and all those elements. But then it's also transforming teaching and learning, where we're using the technology to actually change the way students learn, but also how teachers support that learning, how they change the way they do their teaching, whether that learning can be more personalized and project-based, but also where teachers can be more mentors and learning managers rather than instructors. So a whole range of different pedagogical practices around that. Also transforming management so that everyone in the school can know more about what's happening around the decision-making processes and being involved in that decision-making processes where they wish to be, and just increase that collaboration and not so much empowerment, but engagement. So everyone feeling that they're part of the decision-making processes and having a say and being able to then support the decisions made at a systemic level. And a few others, enhancing collaboration. So again, technology has got a fantastic opportunity to collaborate more. Sharing resources has been a common one. But the idea that we could be team teaching with teachers internationally, or students taking courses internationally or at other schools using online technology, bringing in expertise from outside, and all those other elements that we have now available with technology. Creating educational communities, particularly with parent groups, but also with other groups in the community, like sporting groups or community groups, old age homes, having them be mentors in, and maybe being able to video conference in and contribute to history lessons and all the other sorts of support they could give, even though they may not be physically able to visit the school. The other technology might be able to assist them in engaging with the school community. And then there's a big long list of things that you can take advantage of. Mentoring programs, setting standards, online teaching and learning, online professional learning, learning systems such as Blackboard and learning management systems, video conferencing, data analysis, electronic reporting, protocols, particularly around ethical behavior with online technologies, security and safety procedures, and governance and administrative procedures to make it a bit more transparent and accountable. So a whole lot of issues and points you can consider, and a few more. This is around building capacity. So coming to the crux of your assignment, how are you going to actually achieve these things in your educational organization? And what are the things that are going to be needed for that to be achievable? So some of the things around understanding the potential of technology. So part of this course in the early stages was around giving you an understanding of what's available in terms of technology and how that it can have an impact upon a learning environment. But that learning has to be transferred to all the stakeholders in a school so that they can understand and contribute to the decision-making processes around such transformations. Understanding the constraints and advantages that technologies can afford, developing a whole school plan and sustaining that over time, providing it sufficient infrastructure and technical support, developing and recognizing staff, student and community leadership, and ensuring quality professional learning that can support all of these things. And a few other things then around professional considerations, that a team-based whole school approach to change is far more effective than an individual leader trying to drive change. The school community should be involved in all of their elements, and they can review the approaches that are being proposed and provide their own inputs. Value the culture of the school, and is it a culture that can engage with risk-taking and innovation? Or how are you going to actually establish that sort of culture in a school? So you may need to start out small and do some small innovations and slowly ramp up to where you can take on the major innovations that are needed to achieve your vision. Understanding the ICT requirements that are going to be needed to achieve all of this, and also understanding that that's going to change over time. Students may all be wearing watches that do all the things that their laptops can do at the moment in a few more years. There could be a whole range of other technology changes that you need to consider. So if you build it all around a particular technology and then the technology changes that makes that obsolete, then that could have a significant impact upon your planning. And getting everyone to participate is always very important. So a few things then around leadership, but I'll leave most of those for you to read yourself. Excuse me. And around, oh, sorry. And around developing that leadership capability. So that's really more about your own personal capability to take on this sort of challenge, but also around identifying these capabilities in your current leaders. If you're going to want to engage with this sort of change, are your current leaders able to demonstrate some of these capabilities? Or are there ways maybe that you can support the development of these capabilities in them? Such as if they lack in technical knowledge, maybe providing some in-service programs whereby you also invite the leaders to come along and learn about the new technologies and their potential. So there's a range of different things, but also just being in a position to inform them about certain issues, such as maybe there is a lack of technical support. And that's one thing that has to be achieved in order to achieve a number of other things. So if technical support is one of the barriers and overcoming that barrier, maybe something that you have to focus on and get the leaders to focus on, because you may not be in a position to change that yourself. But if you can influence the change in the leaders to then influence that change, that may still achieve your aim. And a few other things there around promoting leadership and building a leadership culture, and a whole range of aspects. That goes another level beyond what we've discussed so far, where we actually start looking at how to make this sort of change something that is natural and is constantly occurring in an educational organization. And for that to occur, you need to build in a leadership model. That's not something that I'm expecting in this course. That's another whole range of skills and capabilities that you could gain from other courses. But actually building a whole leadership model and promoting leadership from within and bringing in external leaders and a whole range of strategies around that is another aspect for ongoing change in an organization. But that steps beyond what we're looking at for this course. So do we have some questions about my lecture that I've just given, which is not meant to be how this course is run, but well. Did it prompt any thoughts? Yep.
Oh, sorry, just saying that our principal is actually leaving. So our school is now in limbo because we don't know who the next principal will be or whether he or she, what agenda they will have. So that's always a difficult position for any school to be in.
It is. And yeah, it is, because the leadership style of the incoming principal is something that's going to be a significant influence on change in an organization. But it does provide an opportunity. If there's been particular blockages with an existing leadership, having a change in leadership can open up new opportunities. And new leaders are often looking for understanding of the organization and also things that they can then get behind and support, because they won't have often had time to develop up their own strategies and plans for change. So if you can present them with a model for change, with a clear vision, they're often quite receptive to that. Sometimes they'll take it for themselves and claim the credit for it, but that's the nature of leadership. But it is often an opportunity where new leaders are quite uncertain themselves and they'll be looking to make change, because that's their role. And you can then often influence that in ways that you can't with a more established leader who's already set in place their particular plans and processes, which may not support your particular aims. Okay, so I'm going to leave the other document for you guys to read yourselves. It's similar to what we've just gone through, also from Machicha, and it goes through a range of elements that you need to consider as dot points. So it's a little bit easier for you to engage with, but some of these are then elaborated in more detail. So for example, the first element of personalizing and extending student learning then has a range of different strategies at 3 different levels, from a developing school to an accomplished school to a leading school. And this is another aspect that you need to consider in your implementation plan, whether or not you're going to try to go straight to a really, really fantastic outcome, so being a leading school, but you may need to start at a developing school level and then put in place strategies to move to an accomplished school level and then to a leading school level. Certainly we'd love everyone to be at a leading school level, but that's the nature of any organization, is that often many of these things take time, and trying to move too quickly can be just as disastrous as not moving at all. So they're things that you can consider in your implementation plans, and there's a whole range of different points there around the capacity to support professional learning, connecting learning beyond the school using various technologies and approaches, improving student assessment and reporting, developing and measuring and monitoring ICT capabilities, assessing and utilizing student information, providing, accessing and managing teaching and learning resources, automating business procedures, providing reliable infrastructure, and then the processes whereby you can go about developing a school using those various points through to from a developed school to an accomplished school through to a leading school. So I trust you'll engage with that document at some stage before your next assignment, because it does provide a whole lot of points that you can incorporate into your implementation plan. And in fact, it makes it quite easy for you because I've given you lots and lots of things that you can incorporate. But what you have to do is identify which are important for your organization and develop a coherent strategy for moving through those points to developing a school that or an organization that you want to see in the future. And that's some of the issues that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. But I'll remind you that next week is a holiday. So you've got a week's break, so you can catch up on your readings and get ahead in your readings so that next time when we meet, we can actually discuss things in more detail rather than me having to go through the document. So any final questions from this evening?
It's not a question, but I read through those documents. I was rather disappointed to situate our school more on the developing end than any other aspects. It's quite depressing, Jason.
It just means there's lots of opportunities for advancement. And I'm sure your school is doing fantastic things, but this is just one area that hopefully you've now got opportunity to show leadership in and provide opportunities, because ICT and developing the use of technologies is just one aspect of education, and a leader in a school has to look at a whole range of other issues beyond just technology. But technology can be an enabler and support mechanism for a lot of other things to occur. And a lot of school leaders don't necessarily have the opportunity and time to focus on technology in education. So that's where developing leadership in this area can provide a great support mechanism for those leaders. Sometimes you've got a leader that does have a passion in this area, and that's fantastic, but more often than not, they've got their passion in other areas, which may be around staff management or a whole lot of other issues, and everyone then brings strength. And that's where a really good organization is developing lots of leaders, all working together to improve the educational process and not relying just upon one or two leaders to try to manage that whole thing. Okay, so I did sort of make the commitment we'd finish up at 9 each evening. So does any other final questions before we end off? Okay, that's a no from Hutan, no from Toby, no from Patricia. Okay then, and for anyone...
No, thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. And for anyone listening online later, send me your emails if you've got questions. Otherwise, I hope to see you online in 2 weeks' time. Okay, bye-bye all.
See you. Thank you. Bye-bye.